Move it. Council's waiting, and they're not sending flowers. Admiral Reese Calder's bark snapped through the loading bay like a whip crack. Boots hammered the deck, crates clanged into position, and the air smelled faintly of cold steel and burned polymer, a storm of activity barely restrained by discipline. Calder stood at the center of it, a slab of authority in a black uniform trimmed in deep navy. His gloved hand tightened around the datapad he hadn't bothered to switch off, the urgent summons from Centurus Prime pulsing red against the laser plasma display. Around him, Earth's best answered the call without question. Above, thick beams of reinforced alloy groaned as the Vindicator's systems ran final diagnostics. The whine of docking clamps releasing sounded like distant wolves. Calder didn't flinch. He watched. Silas Wren, Earth's senior envoy, approached with a grace honed in 100 tense negotiations. His coat swept behind him, the brushed fabric whispering over polished boots. He halted beside Calder, studying the Admiral's profile with a tilt of the head. "They're dressing this up as a courtesy call," Wren muttered, voice low and dry. "No one sends a courtesy summons across 3 sectors with diplomatic overrides." Calder's reply came without turning. "We're not going to Centurus to kiss rings." Wren's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Good, I forgot my gloves." Down the ramp, Draven Vox wrangled the last of the gear into lock compartments, muttering to himself about variable signal distortion fields. A smell of coolant and heated plastic clung to his uniform. Even at rest, Vox exuded the nervous energy of a man always 2 thoughts ahead of his own hands. "All systems locked and synced, Admiral," Vox called out, his voice clear but tight. "Encryption layers are triple stacked. No one's ghosting our data." Calder nodded once, the subtle shift of muscle underlined by silent approval. Outside the bay's shielded mouth, Earth's orbital view gleamed, a crisp lattice of dockyards stitched together under the shimmering green aurorae of the magnetosphere. Cargo haulers slipped between lanes, their hulls glinting like dark knives. It wasn't beauty, Calder saw. It was vulnerability. He turned sharply, boots striking the deck. "Embark." Their ship, the Vindicator, thrummed as power cycled from standby to full readiness. The scent of warmed polymers thickened the air, mingling with the sharp, biting tang of charged fields as the crew filtered aboard. Overhead, banks of laser plasma displays flickered to life, status streams cascading in tight, purposeful lines of information. Inside the command cabin, Calder strapped into his seat, the worn leather fitting his frame like a second skin. The rest of the delegation followed suit without needing to be told. Wren settled with a casual sigh, legs crossed at the ankle, the image of lazy indifference. Vox fiddled with his console, eyes flickering with a restless hunger for detail. A low, dense vibration climbed up Calder's boots as the Vindicator disengaged from the docking clamps. The deck underfoot shivered with quiet strength. Navigation lights bled against the void as engines propelled them forward with a throaty growl, not noise but a feeling, a shudder carried through bone. "Course laid in," Vox announced, fingers dancing over his console, secure channels open. Calder keyed into the intercom. "Crew, listen sharp. We are representing Earth. Maintain stance. No signals, no transmissions without clearance. We play this cold." A chorus of acknowledgments snapped back, crisp as breaking ice. Through the cockpit's forward viewport, stars carved brilliant lines as the ship transitioned to slipstream. Wren watched the swirl of colors with a frown shadowing his normally impassive face. "They're afraid," he said quietly, almost to himself. Calder didn't answer. He was thinking of the reports, the ones that never made it to the news feeds. Human colonies rising from the ashes of hostile worlds, adapting, thriving, expanding outward in a wave that no one had predicted. Their ingenuity bred fear faster than fleets. The ship hummed. No, not a hum, more a deep, breathless exhale, as it plunged through space. The air smelled faintly of scorched silicon and clean circuits. Vox tapped out another security sweep, the display lighting up his sharp features in brief, clinical flashes. "Draven," Calder said, voice like a blade slipping from its sheath, "what's the Council's real game?" Vox barely looked up. "Provoke a response. Probe weaknesses. Maybe make an example." Wren tilted his head back against the seat. "They always mistake patience for compliance." Old story. The deck plates vibrated under a brief course correction. A cold metallic edge crept into the atmosphere, tightening lungs and sharpening every word. Calder took it all in, the nervous glances, the quick hand gestures, the brittle edge to every breath. His people felt it too. Good. Pressure revealed truth. It stripped down the platitudes until only resolve remained. He remembered the briefings, how several colonies had begun outfitting freighters with reinforced hulls and buried weapons systems. Rumors of stealth platforms orbiting dead moons, pulse batteries hidden inside abandoned mining stations. Earth was smiling politely, but it had been sharpening knives in the dark. The seat's restraint harness flexed as the ship made another shift. Calder leaned forward, elbows on knees, knuckles folding together. "Reminder," he said, voice low enough that the cabin seemed to lean in. "We didn't ask to be called here. We don't owe them pleasantries. Measure your words. Measure your silences even more." Wren offered a two-fingered salute, ironic and sharp. Vox just nodded, mouth set in a grim line. A chime sounded 30 minutes to emergence. Lights dimmed, emergency systems ran silent tests. Even the recycled air tasted colder, as if the Vindicator itself were holding its breath. Calder stood, feeling the tug of inertia, as he moved toward the observation bay. The galaxy rolled out before him in a velvet spread of burning points. Somewhere beyond the nearest stars, politics and fear were grinding against each other like tectonic plates. Earth's place wasn't on the council floor, not anymore. It was standing at the doorway, hammer in hand. His reflection stared back from the transparent panel, lines cut deep into a face that had spent decades learning the weight of waiting for the right moment to strike. Centurus Prime glimmered ahead, its twin suns casting long amber shadows across the spined towers of the council citadel, a place built for giants who thought themselves invulnerable. Calder's mouth curved into something that might once have been a smile. "Time to see," he murmured, "if they still remember how to bleed. Eyes open, gentlemen. If they're smiling when we arrive, it's already too late." Calder's voice cut through the cabin's stillness as the Vindicator dropped from slipstream. The ship's frame shivered once, then steadied, caught between distant gravitational tides. Stars sharpened into pinpoints against the black, each one cruel and cold as nails hammered into velvet. Inside, the air tasted dry, recycled too many times through the filters, carrying a sterile bite that caught at the back of the throat. The emergency lighting had dimmed, the panels along the walls casting a muted amber glow that painted long shadows across the crew's faces. Ahead, Centurus Prime rose like a wound against the stars, a coiling mass of glass and stone, haloed by defensive rings that bristled with weaponry disguised as ornament. The twin suns hung low behind it, bleeding gold and crimson into space. "Still looks like a fortress pretending to be a cathedral," Wren muttered, leaning back, his boots resting lightly against the frame of his station. Vox didn't look up from his heads-up display. "Looks unstable. Traffic control relays are bouncing signals out of sync." Calder narrowed his eyes. Meaning either their infrastructure's rotting, or someone's trying very hard to confuse incoming scans. Vox's fingers darted across the console, pulling thin streams of data into tight bursts of analysis. The screen washed his face in pale green. The ship banked gently, maneuvering thrusters pulsing a subtle rhythm through the deck, the vibration barely more than a whisper against their boots. Calder allowed the sensation to roll through him, measuring the slight delays, the artificial sluggishness in the Vindicator's responses. "They're tracking us," Wren said, voice casual as a man noting the weather. "Tighten up our signature, no need to offer invitations." Vox adjusted the fields with a flick of his wrist, a soft chime confirming the change. The silence that followed thickened, not heavy, but taut, like a blade balanced on a thread. Wren broke it first. "You ever wonder, Admiral, how many council meetings started with cordial invitations and ended with fleets burning?" Calder turned his head slightly, the barest acknowledgement. "That's why we brought our own matches." Wren smiled thinly, shifting to pull a battered data slate from his coat. He tapped it against his palm, a steady, absent-minded rhythm that filled the small space between words. "You know," Wren said after a beat, "they never really forgave us. Not after Helion Drift. One colony, one minor territorial claim, and suddenly we're an emerging threat." His words dripped with a sarcasm honed by years of listening to double-tongued diplomats. "Vox, distracted by a fresh anomaly blinking across his station, grunted softly. Wasn't the land, it was the speed. No species moves like we do. They think in centuries, we think in seasons. Calder absorbed the words without comment, studying the growing mass of Centurus Prime ahead. Docking lanes spiraled around the station like the broken ribs of a dying beast. The Council's vaunted strength had always been its unity, until humanity reminded them how fast fractures spread. Vox's voice sharpened. Got a data conflict. Wren raised an eyebrow. Good news first. Vox shook his head. Star maps show colonies we don't own. Whole sectors tagged as human-aligned. Some of them we haven't even scouted. Wren's humor evaporated. Someone's painting targets on us. Calder's jaw tightened, the muscles along his cheek twitching once. Prepare to record everything from the moment we dock. Assume every corridor has ears. The ship's guidance system pinged, signaling automated approach vectors. Centurus Prime's outer bastions loomed larger, structures encrusted with weapon mounts, half hidden behind ceremonial banners, and flowing, crystalline mosaics. It was a face smiling with too many teeth. Weapon scans, Calder asked. Vox's fingers hesitated over the controls. Quiet, too quiet. Wren gave a low whistle. Traps set. The ship eased into the docking cradle with a shudder that rattled through the frames. The locking clamps snapped shut with a finality that sounded almost predatory. From the viewport, the arrival bay yawned open. No welcoming party, no diplomatic salutes, just the hollow echo of empty space framed by towering pillars. They want us off balance, Wren said, standing and brushing invisible dust from his sleeves. Calder rose without a word. He strapped his sidearm into place beneath his coat, a small unspoken defiance against the Council's sanctimony. Vox secured the portable servers into a hardened case, the heavy locks engaging with a muted hiss. The airlock cycled, a rush of dry, cold air surging into the ship. It carried a faint sharpness, like dust scoured clean by electric storms. They stepped into the dock, boots striking stone slabs veined with strange luminous minerals. Light refracted strangely here, the twin suns throwing fractured shadows that skittered like broken glass across the floor. Calder walked first, his stride steady, unhurried. Wren flanked him with an easy, sardonic grace. Vox kept slightly behind, every sense tuned to the tiniest disturbance. The silence pressed against them, not a natural stillness, but a studied, deliberate emptiness. Eyes watched from hidden alcoves. Calder could feel the gaze like a thorn brushing the skin, never quite breaking through, but always there, an itch that couldn't be scratched. Wren leaned closer. Feels like a funeral. Calder kept his gaze forward. Maybe it is. Ahead, the grand entrance to the council chamber loomed. Carved from a single piece of obsidian gray stone, the doors bore the scars of ancient wars and treaties, each mark a memory etched into permanence. As they approached, the doors began to part. No guards, no ceremony, just the slow, grinding scrape of stone against stone, like old bones shifting in a forgotten grave. Inside, the chamber waited, an arena disguised as diplomacy. Calder stopped just before the threshold, the soles of his boots scuffing faintly against the ancient floor. The air inside smelled faintly of dust and something older, something bitter that clung to memory rather than scent. Wren touched the side of his head lightly, adjusting the translator node. His fingers brushed a new implant tucked just behind his ear. Covert tech, unregistered. Vox tightened his grip on the server case, his knuckles whitening. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say that words could shield. The delegation stepped forward as one, crossing into the den. Behind them, the doors closed with a sound like a world ending. Don't kneel, not even once. Calder's voice was low, meant only for Wren and Vox as they crossed into the council chamber. The room stretched outward like an open maw, tiers of stone seats rising into shadow. Figures robed in deep crimsons, silvers and muted golds leaned forward as Earth's delegation entered, their faces hidden behind intricate masks etched with ancient sigils. Above them, vast banners hung heavy from arched beams, each one embroidered with the emblem of a founding species. The air pressed cold and dry against skin, carrying the faint tang of minerals and age, as if the walls themselves exhaled the dust of old betrayals. At the far end a dais rose, and on it the first speaker of the Galactic Council, an imposing figure draped in cloth that seemed to ripple between blue and black. His voice broke the silence, rich and measured, yet coiled with hidden thorns. Earth stands accused of unauthorized militarization, illegal territorial expansion, and destabilization of allied sectors. The words fell like stones into still water. No greetings, no preamble. Calder's gaze didn't flicker. He walked to the center of the chamber with deliberate ease, boots whispering over the veined marble floor. Ren flanked him lightly. A half-step behind, posture relaxed but alert. Vox brought up the rear, cradling the server case like a coiled animal waiting to strike. The first speaker raised an arm, and the center dais lit up with a projected array of images from laser plasma displays. A sequence of colony outposts, each one flashing red under the heading, Human Aggression Detected. Grainy footage showed Earth ships bristling with weapons, heavy transports escorted by combat vessels, planetary surfaces scorched and cratered. The murmurs among the seated delegates built like a rising tide, a susurrus of outrage carefully staged for effect. Ren stepped forward, voice carrying with the effortless command of a born negotiator. First speaker, Earth formally contests the validity of these allegations. We have abided by all agreed-upon colonial statutes. We demand the right to review the submitted evidence independently. A ripple of mockery skated through the chamber. The first speaker answered with a smile hidden beneath the folds of his mask. You will have ample opportunity to explain yourselves after sanctions are imposed. Vox's fingers twitched against the case, the faintest signal to Calder. Calder's voice slid into the moment like a blade between ribs. You've already written the sentence. Spare us the theater. Several council members stiffened. Across the chamber, another figure rose, Councillor Virex, a towering being with skin the color of tarnished bronze. His eyes glowed faintly, the mark of his people's genetic augments. You speak boldly for an infant race, Virex said, voice booming like a drum. Growth unchecked leads to destruction. You overstep. Calder's mouth curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Caution from an empire built on subjugation. How quaint. The tension snapped tight enough to vibrate in the bones. Ren tilted his head, calculating angles. First speaker, where is the independent verification of these images? Who authenticated them? The question sliced the murmuring crowd into silence. The first speaker gestured, more data cascaded onto the display, charts, ship manifests, communications logs. At a glance, overwhelming. But to trained eyes, inconsistencies lurked, wrong registry numbers, ships flagged in two places at once, planetary dates that didn't match stellar cycles. Vox's eyes narrowed. His voice, when it came, was ice over stone. This data is doctored. A stir ran through the council like a breath, catching in a throat. Vox continued, stepping closer to the display. Here, this ship's logged destruction 3 cycles ago. And here, communications routed through non-existent relay stations. Your evidence is a fiction. The first speaker's mask tilted slightly. Are you suggesting the council fabricates charges? Ren stepped into the charged pause. We suggest that someone believes a lie is easier than facing the truth. Calder's boots clicked once against the stone, a sound loud in the stunned quiet. He clasped his hands behind his back, the posture of a man offering no apologies. Humanity has expanded, Calder said, voice carrying weight that settled into every listening ear. We built homes where others abandoned worlds. We sowed where others salted earth, and we defended what we made. If survival offends you, then you will have to find new laws to outlaw it. The chamber erupted. Shouts, gestures. A dozen species speaking at once in a cacophony of anger. Above it all, the first speaker's hand rose, demanding silence. It fell in uneasy waves. Councillor Virex glared down from his perch. Then you admit your guilt. Calder's reply was a slow burn. I admit only that we refuse to apologize for existing. The councillors leaned into hurried conferences, words traded like knives behind veils and masks. Ren glanced sideways at Calder. We may not walk out of this. Calder's mouth barely moved. Then we leave an impression. Vox's head dipped slightly, affirming readiness. His server case pulsed once, silent and unseen, transmitting a condensed proof of the Council's data tampering directly to Earth Command. The first speaker straightened. Then Earth must submit to oversight, disarmament, supervision of all expansion activities. It was not an offer. It was a leash. Calder's response came cool and clear. No. The word hung in the air like a stone thrown into a pool of acid. Counselor Virex bared teeth in a predatory smile. Defiance will cost you dearly. Calder's gaze hardened to flint. Only if you mistake our patience for surrender. For one heartbeat, the chamber seemed to freeze. Behind Calder, Wren's hand drifted near his belt, where a hidden transmitter rested, ready to call reinforcements if things turned bloody. Vox shifted his weight subtly, setting the server case down in a stance of readiness. The first speaker's hands folded within his robes. Then Earth has chosen its path. Calder inclined his head, the movement sharp as a blade shearing silk. We always did. Without waiting for formal dismissal, Earth's delegation turned, boots raking across the marble with deliberate, unified steps. The doors did not open for them. They had to force them apart, the stone grinding reluctantly against ancient mechanisms. As they stepped into the stark corridor beyond, Wren exhaled through his nose. That went well. Calder's mouth twitched once. Depends which part you're measuring. Behind them, inside the council chamber, the first seeds of something older than war were being sown. Something colder, something inevitable. Execute ice wall. Now. Calder's order sliced the heavy quiet as they moved down the council corridor, flanked by pillars casting warped shadows. Vox didn't hesitate. His fingers danced across his forearm console, hidden beneath the folds of his uniform. A muted signal pulsed outward, invisible to any prying surveillance. He felt the brief warmth against his skin, as the transmission leapt through encrypted channels, threading its way through cloaked satellites orbiting Centurus Prime. Above them, where twin suns burned low, something shifted. A ripple, a distortion of light no natural force could explain, spread across the starfield. Calder's stride remained unbroken. Wren, catching the flicker in the viewport's high frame, tilted his head with a smirk so thin it barely touched his mouth. They won't see the knife until they bleed, Wren murmured. Across space, Project Icewall unfolded. Earth's unseen arsenal, satellites hidden in cold shadows, activated in a synchronized flare. Stealth cruisers, previously indistinguishable from cosmic debris, aligned in combat formations, silent and patient. Signal jammers embedded inside civilian-looking relay stations awakened, distorting council communication webs into static-laden messes. Calder tapped his comm-bead once. Confirm Stage 1 readiness. A voice, clipped and clear, responded through the encrypted channel. Stage 1 complete. Platforms armed. Cloaks stable. Vox adjusted his portable console. Lines of data scrolled in tight formation across his heads-up display. He initiated the second phase without waiting for approval, surgical infiltration into the Council's internal systems. The air tasted of dry metal filings as static charges danced along the walls, the signs of aggressive network intrusion bleeding into the physical atmosphere. "We're in," Vox said, his voice almost reverent. Inside the chamber, counselors began to fidget, glancing at personal displays that now fed them flickering, corrupted feeds. "Take them deeper," Calder said softly. Vox unleashed the second payload, doctored council communiques, secret treaties signed in backdoor rooms, resource siphoning plans that condemned lesser species to extinction, all surfaced in front of stunned council members. Wren moved like a chess master sensing a weakened opponent. He peeled off from Calder's side and addressed the chamber with an air of deliberate casualness. "I wonder," Wren said, voice echoing slightly in the high vaults, "how many here remember the Fifth Accord? How many remember what happened to the Coran tribes after you promised protection?" Heads turned sharply, old ghosts stirred, or the Procyon enclaves. Wren pressed, stepping forward into the breathless silence, signed into oblivion for mining rights. The images blazed across the laser plasma projectors, now under Vox's command, each ugly betrayal playing out in brutal clarity. Counselor Virex rose from his seat, fury barely contained, his thick fingers clawing the air. "You dare hack council archives, you violate sacred law." Calder moved before anyone else could react. His voice was a hammer wrapped in silk. "We expose what you buried," Calder said. "Your laws were made to shield your own sins. Earth didn't invent corruption, Counselor. We simply refuse to be shackled by it." Around the chamber, the seated counselors shifted uneasily. The banners overhead trembled faintly in an unseen current, as if the room itself recoiled. Vox continued sifting through the council's sealed records, tossing ugly truths into the open like seeds on scorched soil. Each revelation struck harder than the last. Unauthorized military deployments, economic embargoes enforced on colonies to squeeze concessions, hidden detention centers where dissenters vanished. The first speaker's voice, when it came, was hoarse with contained rage. "You think showing old wounds will erase your crimes?" Ren answered first, voice steady as the tide. "We commit no crime defending ourselves from those who would destroy us with a pen rather than a blade." Vox deployed the final transmission. Earth's cloaked fleet shimmered into visibility above Centurus Prime, the sudden presence lighting up Council defensive grids in a scatter of desperate, scrambling alerts. Orbital platforms, disguised for years as asteroid monitoring stations, revealed weapon mounts sliding into firing positions. The counselors jerked upright in their seats. Some reached for private comms, others froze. Calder allowed a sliver of steel into his tone. "We are not here to fight. We are here to remind you. Earth stands ready." Behind him, Ren's mouth curled into a smile that was all teeth. Virex thundered, "You threaten the council." Calder's reply fell like a falling star. "We offer you a choice." Vox muted the entire hall's outbound communications with a single sweep of his hand. Every transmission line inside Centurus Prime died, the buzz of council chatter replaced by a hollow, cutting silence. "They cannot call for reinforcements," Vox said under his breath. Calder turned fully to face the assembly. "For years," Calder said, words clean and deliberate, "Earth listened. We accepted your ridicule, your manipulation, your theft. No more. We will not kneel to liars." The room seemed to shrink, the walls bending inward under the weight of history unfolding. Ren took one final step forward, standing where the council's judgment dais had once seemed invulnerable. "This isn't an act of war," Ren said. "It's a declaration that Earth refuses to play dead for an empire rotting from the inside." Vox, glancing over his readouts, whispered, "Council fleets on standby. They're rattled but not moving yet." Calder nodded once, a signal buried in the subtlest motion. Above them, Earth's cloaked armada shifted, surrounding the station without firing a shot, silent, implacable. The first speaker's voice emerged, brittle. "What do you demand?" Calder took the room's breath with 3 words: truth, respect, autonomy. He let the silence bloom around it, the weight of it sinking into the ancient stones. Counselor Virex glowered, but stayed seated. Across the chamber, another counselor, this one from the lesser trading world, stood, his robes trailing the floor. His voice was soft but firm. "Earth speaks with force, but also with reason." A small beginning crack in the wall. Calder turned, the heavy cloak of command settling fully across his shoulders. He could feel Ren's silent approval, Vox's steady presence at his back. The council was learning what it meant to wake a nation that had clawed its way from survival to supremacy. And Earth had no intention of crawling back into the shadows. "Shift formation to shield Vector 6. If they flinch, we hold." Calder's voice was a quiet command sliding into the encrypted comms channel as he watched the council chamber begin to fracture before his eyes. Above Centurus Prime, Earth's cloaked fleet obeyed without fanfare. Battleships reoriented into a layered defense pattern, not aggressive but unmovable, their outlines barely catching the twin suns' strained light. Inside the chamber, ancient alliances strained against the new reality Earth had forced into existence. Delegates whispered furiously across the stone galleries, robes brushing against stone and leather in hurried conference. Vox scanned the council's internal channels through a back door he had pried open minutes before. His heads-up display flickered with frantic signals, threat assessments, risk calculations, emergency debates boiling behind closed circuits. "They're rattling their sabers," Vox said under his breath. But the blades still sheathed. Ren's mouth curved into a tight smile. Even the great houses don't like betting on a losing hand. Calder studied the chamber's currents like a seasoned navigator reading dangerous waters. His gaze swept over the Valyrian delegation, tall and severe, their polished bone armor gleaming dully in the strained light. To their left, the Khulathi representatives bristled, spiny crests twitching with suppressed rage. Beside them, the Medusan envoys coiled and uncoiled in their silk wraps, their movements slow and predatory. "They're aligning," Calder murmured, almost to himself. Across the hall, smaller delegations huddled together, species Earth had traded with quietly over the years. The Sindari thin and reedy but sharp as broken glass, the Brelix consortium, traders and smugglers who owed Earth debts too old to be forgotten, the minor houses of the Eastern Drift. The first speaker struck the floor with his staff, the sound echoing against the stone vaults. "The Council must decide," he announced. "Humanity's fate cannot remain unresolved." Councillor Virex stood first, his towering frame casting a deep shadow over the floor. His voice thundered across the room. "The evidence is clear. Humanity destabilizes the galaxy's balance. They must be contained, by force if necessary." A chorus of agreement rumbled from the Valyrians and Khulathi. Ren folded his arms loosely across his chest. "Containment," he whispered to Calder. "Their favorite lie." Vox's fingers twitched. "Containment won't stop us. They know it, that's why they're scared." Calder didn't smile, he simply stepped forward, drawing every eye without a single raised voice. "Containment," Calder said, his words landing with the weight of stone. "You mistake growth for aggression. You mistake independence for rebellion. Earth didn't come here seeking conquest. We came seeking respect, but if you think force will change our course, try it." The chamber reeled. Councillor Selleck of the Sindari rose slowly, hands clasped behind his back. His voice was thin but unwavering. "The humans build, they protect, they trade fairly. Can we say the same of all who sit here?" Gasps followed, and a ripple of unease surged through the great houses. Another figure stood, this time a Brellan representative, his robes faded but clean. "Earth helped rebuild our colonies after the Khulathi raids. When your fleets ignored our pleas, small alliances, overlooked until now, were stepping into the light." Virex slammed his fist into the armrest. "You'd side with them, over your own?" The Brellan's face hardened. "You forgot us long ago." Calder turned his head slightly, catching Ren's eye. It was a glance rich with strategy and patience. "Hold the line," Calder said under his breath. Above, unseen but ever present, Earth's fleet adjusted again, spreading into a protective screen that wrapped Centurus Prime in invisible arms. Vox murmured, "Medusan warships are stirring. They're feeding data into Council command." Calder nodded once. "Monitor. Do not engage." On the floor, the first speaker's voice wavered, uncertainty creeping into the cracks of his carefully practiced facade. "This division weakens us all," he said, words falling like brittle leaves. Ren stepped forward, his presence a sharp contrast to the speaker's unraveling control. "No," Ren said calmly, "this division reveals what was already broken. You built an empire on compliance, not consent. Earth refuses both." Murmurs blossomed again, less angry now, more curious. Calder pressed the advantage. "We are not your subjects. We will not be your scapegoats. We demand recognition, equal standing, nothing less." The first speaker faltered, his staff tapping once against the floor, an old man seeking balance he no longer had. Behind him, the Valyrian envoy whispered furiously with the Khulathi delegation. Weapons readiness signals flickered across hidden comms. "They're considering a strike," Vox said, voice tight. Calder's mind raced through possibilities, each one laid out like a map unfolding beneath his feet. He tapped his comm bead twice, an unspoken code. In orbit, the Resolute, Earth's lead dreadnought, decloaked with agonizing slowness, the gleaming hull breaking sunlight into refracted spears that stabbed across space. Not a weapon fired, no threat was spoken, yet the meaning was unmistakable. Councillor Virex recoiled as alerts flared across the chamber's heads-up displays. "You came prepared for war," Virex snarled. Calder answered evenly. "We came prepared for survival." At that moment, a pulse of secured data lit up Calder's personal heads-up feed, a message from Earth's leadership. President Stroud's face, stern and composed, filled the screen. Vox caught the flicker. The speech is loaded. Calder tapped the console once, locking it in standby. Not yet, Calder said. His voice carried an iron patience. First let them tear themselves apart, and tear they did. The Sindari called for a full re-evaluation of council protocols. The Brelics demanded an inquiry into corruption. Old rivalries reignited like dry timber under a torch, consuming the chamber's fragile unity. Wren leaned closer, voice dry as desert winds. You feel that? Calder's mouth barely moved. The frost is spreading. The great powers blustered and roared, but the room had already shifted. For every voice crying war, two more questioned the wisdom of bloodshed. Above, Earth's fleet held position, silent as the stars. The Council, once united in its disdain for humanity, now fractured, each crack widening with every second of hesitation. And Calder, standing at the eye of the gathering storm, knew they had already won the first war without firing a shot. Hold your ground. Show them teeth, not blood. Calder's command settled into the encrypted line, crisp and clean as the council chamber's arguments echoed like distant thunder behind him. In orbit, Earth's fleet adjusted into Shield Vector 9, a layered blockade designed not to strike but to absorb. Platforms unfolded panels of reinforced alloys, scattering defensive fields like glassy webs across choke points. No weapon raised, no engines flared, yet the trap was ready to snap shut if provoked. The air inside the observation deck was crisp, laced with the scent of sterile polymers and heated wiring. Calder stood at the wide viewport, hands clasped loosely behind his back, watching Centurus Prime's defensive grids flicker uncertainly against the cold backdrop of space. Wren leaned against the side console, arms crossed, studying the endless traffic of small diplomatic craft scurrying away from the council station like frightened fish. They're pulling their soft assets, Wren observed, his voice low and thoughtful. Not a retreat, more like hedging bets. Calder didn't turn. They're scared of who's standing behind us. Vox hunched over the auxiliary console, sifted through intercepted council chatter. Heads-up displays projected soft streams of flickering data into the air around him, the words tight and panicked. They're calling emergency sessions, Vox said. Some want a unified strike, others want concessions. Wren grunted. They'd rather bury the hatchet in our backs. Calder's mouth thinned. They're welcome to try. The Resolute drifted silently above, its hull bristling with shield generators, weapon emplacements masked behind reconfigurable armor plates. Farther out, the blockade ships had layered their fields to create overlapping defensive shells, orbital bastions that could repel a full assault without firing the first shot. Earth's strength wasn't just in weapons, it was the will to use them if forced. Status of icewall platforms, Calder asked. Vox glanced up, cloak stable, no external detection yet. Orbital mirrors deployed, shield interlocks in standby. Calder nodded. Good. Let's make it clear, we are the wall, not the sword. Across the deck, Wren shifted, eyes glinting with mischief. Still think we should have brought fireworks, he said lightly. Calder allowed a ghost of a smile. Not our style. A soft chime sounded from Vox's console. Incoming message. Vox tapped a sequence, and President Stroud's pre-recorded address cued on the side monitor. Stern, articulate, unflinching. She's ready, Vox said. Calder didn't touch the activation switch. Not yet. They'll reach for the gun before the pen, Calder said, almost to himself. Outside the window, small ships broke formation, scattering toward neutral sectors. Others remained, tension freezing them in place. Inside the council chamber, the arguments grew louder. Calder could hear the reverberations through the walls, a mixture of guttural threats, clipped demands, desperate pleas. Some of them are trying to stall, Wren murmured, buying time for fleets to reposition. Calder tapped the comm bead once. Deploy picket drones, full perimeter surveillance, no gaps. Vox nodded, hands moving with surety. Across space, hundreds of sensor drones launched, their tiny frames dispersing like seeds in the void, each one spinning a net of watchful eyes around Centurus Prime. They blink wrong, we'll know, Vox confirmed. Wren pushed off the wall. All this restraint makes you wonder what happens if someone forgets to breathe the right way. Calder's gaze never wavered. Then we remind them what breathing costs. Minutes stretched thin, sweat beaded under uniforms, unacknowledged. The recycled air grew heavier, tasting faintly of ionized particles from the high-energy fields surrounding the station. A sudden flare caught Calder's attention. A Colothi battleship, breaking from formation. Its sleek, knotted hull gleamed with the shifting colors of its energy banks warming to life. Movement on the outer rim, Vox said, voice clipped. Calder didn't flinch. Track only, do not engage. A heartbeat later, the battleship veered back into holding position, its threat measured, weighed, and found wanting. They're testing reactions, Wren said. Calder's hand tightened slightly behind his back. Let them. Across the deck, the auxiliary screen showed council votes shifting by the second, resolutions proposed and shot down, demands drafted and buried, alliances fraying under the strain. They can't hold consensus, Vox said. Too many fractures. Calder finally turned from the window, facing his team fully. Earth's strength isn't in our ships, it's in making sure they never know when we'll use them. Wren tilted his head, considering. Diplomacy at gunpoint. Calder corrected him quietly. Diplomacy backed by resolve. Vox signaled again. Council's sending an envoy, a transport shuttle detached from the station, heading toward the Vindicator. A single vessel, unescorted, unarmed. Wren exhaled slowly. Well, either an olive branch or a poison knife. Calder moved toward the docking ramp, boots striking the deck with measured weight. We're prepared for either. The airlock cycled open, releasing a hiss of pressure and a gust of chilled air that smelled faintly of sterilizers and aging stone. The Envoy stepped aboard, a thin, reedy figure wrapped in neutral grays, eyes sunken and watchful. He bowed stiffly. The Council requests parley. Calder said nothing at first, letting silence stretch long enough to remind the Envoy who commanded the field now. Finally, Calder spoke, voice calm and lethal. We'll listen. The Envoy swallowed visibly and extended a slim data cylinder. Wren took it, scanning it briefly before passing it to Vox. Encrypted. High level. Vox cracked the code with practiced ease. Heads-up displays lit with the Council's proposal, monitored independence, phased military reductions, observer missions stationed at human colonies. Calder read the terms once, then twice, before shaking his head. They still think we're bargaining for chains. He returned the data cylinder to the Envoy, with a motion as final as a gavel falling. Tell them, Earth accepts nothing less than sovereignty, full and unconditional. The Envoy hesitated, skin paling before nodding once and retreating. As the airlock sealed, Wren gave a low chuckle. I think they expected us to crawl. They'll learn, Calder said. Above, Earth's blockade tightened imperceptibly, not as a threat, but a promise. War could come. Earth would not start it, but it would finish it. Send the transmission, Calder ordered, the words crisp as frost splitting stone. Vox keyed the final sequence into the console. Above the council chamber, the massive heads-up displays crackled to life, washing the hall in a cool, sharp blue light. The assembled delegates turned, their arguments severed mid-breath, as President Stroud's image filled the vault. Her face, lit by the steady glow of Earth's command dais, bore the marks of years spent wrestling chaos into order, lines of battle worn into dignity. She wore no armor, no emblems of war, only the dark weave of her diplomatic robes, stitched with the subtle thread of Earth's colors. Her voice carried across the stone chamber like a river cutting through bedrock. Delegates of the Galactic Council, Stroud began, her tone even, deliberate, unstoppable. You summoned Earth to answer for growth, for independence. You summoned us to kneel. Murmurs stirred, robes rasping against marble, as councilors shifted in their seats. Stroud's gaze swept over them, calm as sunrise after a storm. We refuse. The finality of those words cracked through the hall. Calder watched the effect ripple outward, some flinching, others hardening into brittle pride. But refusal is not rebellion, Stroud continued. It is a choice to walk a different road. Behind Calder, Wren folded his arms loosely, the ghost of a smile touching his mouth. Vox adjusted the feed to boost signal clarity, the message slicing through the Council's tangled networks without resistance. Stroud's image leaned forward slightly, voice lowering, not in threat, but in fierce invitation. We offer you a future built on partnership, not subjugation. A council where every voice is heard, not only the loudest, the oldest, or the strongest. Several minor delegates leaned forward unconsciously, drawn in despite themselves. We offer reform, Stroud said. True reform, equal votes, equal protections, equal stakes. A low rumble of protest began from the Valyrian seats, but it died under the weight of 100 unspoken grievances. Stroud pressed on. Earth will defend itself, if forced, but we will not fire the first shot. We do not seek dominion, we seek dignity. Her hand moved, slow and sure, activating a projection behind her, a visual of Earth's fleet in defensive formation. No weapons aimed, no ships advancing, just a wall of silent guardians. The display shifted, showing human colonies thriving alongside alien enclaves, Sindari trade hubs bustling under human security umbrellas, Brellic stations rebuilt after decades of neglect, smaller species negotiating openly in once forbidden spaces. Proof, not promises. The chamber breathed slower, the earlier fever breaking into a chill pause. Calder let the silence sharpen. Every second stretched into another splinter driven under the old order's skin. Stroud's voice gentled at the edges. We will not beg for a seat at your table. We build our own, and every willing hand will find a place at it. The final image flickered into being, the sigil of Earth surrounded not by warships, but by an open ring of stars, symbol of unity, not dominance. Stroud's image faded, but the aftershock remained, hanging in the air like thunder that had yet to break. The first speaker gripped his staff tighter, knuckles bleaching. He opened his mouth once, twice, before words came. You propose a dismantling of centuries of order. Wren answered before Calder could. His voice was smooth as worn river stone. We propose survival, yours included. Counselor Vyrix stood, rigid, rage simmering in his posture. You threatened to tear the council apart. Calder's reply was a hammer dropped into glass. You already did. The Khulathi envoy snarled, but no attack came. No fleets moved. Earth's silent readiness weighed heavier than any shouted threat. Across the chamber, smaller delegations whispered among themselves, furtive but alive with possibility. Old debts, forgotten injustices, new hopes. Vox leaned closer to Calder. Signal from the Sindari. They want talks. Calder nodded once, a crack worth widening. Counselor Silic of the Sindari rose, his frail voice threading the charged silence. Earth offers what we once hoped the council could be. Murmurs grew louder. Delegations who once bowed in habitual obedience now straightened subtly. Sensing the shift, Wren watched it unfold with the satisfaction of a chess master who had moved the final piece into place. The first speaker's mask of control crumbled further. If we refuse, the speaker asked. Calder met the question with a stare cold enough to flay. Then you face Earth standing tall, and you stand alone. No boasts, no threats, just the plain brutal truth. Behind him, the Resolute maintained orbit, shields flaring softly as solar winds brushed their fields, a steady reminder of consequences. The council chamber rippled, not with fury, but with uncertainty. The kind that hollowed empires. Vyrix hissed low in his throat. You think you can reshape the galaxy. Calder's voice was quieter than before, but every word struck like iron. We don't think, we know. Wren stepped forward once more, his coat brushing the smooth stone floor. You always believed survival meant submission. You were wrong. Vox's heads-up displays showed the Sindari formal proposal ping Earth system first, then the Brellics, then the Mevith Compact. One by one the smaller powers shifted, not with speeches or declarations, but by reaching for the future Earth had just offered. Wren glanced sideways at Calder. It's happening. Calder allowed the smallest tilt of his head. Approval, hard-earned and well-placed. Across the chamber, banners of the great houses still fluttered defiantly, but now they looked tired, relics trying to outshout the tide. The first speaker slammed his staff once more against the stone, a brittle sound lost in the rising murmur of change. We will convene, a full assembly, to vote. His voice carried the weight of inevitability. Calder inclined his head slightly, the gesture one of a victor who understood that winning often meant leaving the sword sheathed. The council chamber, built to withstand the ages, trembled subtly, not from weapons or engines, but from the turning of history's wheel. Stand down to alert green. Keep positions locked. Calder's voice moved through the comms like the first breath after a long dive, calm but edged with readiness. Above Centurus Prime, Earth's fleet relaxed fractionally, defensive fields lowering just enough to signal restraint without surrender. Warships held formation, silent sentinels wrapped in cold light. Inside the council chamber, The final toll of the decision hung heavy in the air. The first speaker's staff rested against the stone dais, forgotten, his shoulders slumping under the burden of old power, eroding into something unfamiliar. The vote was not unanimous. It never could be, but it was enough. By a margin born of shifting loyalties and quiet desperation, the Council agreed a full review of charter laws, with Earth's proposals forming the foundation for debate. The banners of the great houses still clung stubbornly to the rafters, but now they drooped like flags after a storm. Ren leaned back in his chair at the observation deck, hands clasped behind his head, the satisfaction in his posture muted, but unmistakable. "They'll call it compromise," he said dryly. "But they'll remember it as surrender." Vox monitored the diplomatic traffic flowing across the heads-up displays, parsing coded admissions of defeat from the official rhetoric of unity. "They're scrambling to spin it," Vox said, tapping a sequence to secure Earth's channels. "Some of the great houses are already pushing narratives, claiming they forced Earth into compliance." Calder allowed himself a slow breath. The air tasted different now, less charged, more grounded, thick with the scent of old stone and unsettled futures. "They'll say whatever helps them sleep tonight," Calder said. "What matters is what they'll say tomorrow." Outside the viewport, diplomatic vessels shifted like flocks of nervous birds. Treaties, trade offers, and tentative alliances flickered across laser plasma screens, each one a ripple from the stone Earth had just hurled into the stagnant pond of galactic politics. "They're afraid of what we represent more than what we did," Ren said, watching the flurry of movement. "Proof that you don't have to play by their rules to win." Calder studied the chaotic dance unfolding beyond the glass. He knew better than to mistake a single vote for permanent victory. Change, real change, would be slow, resisted at every step by those who had shaped the old order with careful cruelty. "Keep the fleet at standby," Calder said. "No withdrawal until we see ink, not promises." Vox nodded, adjusting protocols. Above them, Earth's blockade remained an unseen wall, a steady reminder that diplomacy's hand was backed by steel. Inside the chamber, smaller delegations mingled with newfound boldness. Old alliances began to fracture quietly, like hairline cracks running through ancient monuments. The Mevith Envoy approached Calder's group first, his gait stiff but determined. His delegation's banner, once a minor blip on the galactic stage, now fluttered with the energy of opportunity. "We look forward to discussing terms." "As equals," he said, offering a shallow nod that meant more than any formal bow. Ren returned it with a faint smile. "We always preferred a handshake to a chain." Behind them, Councillor Vyrix glared, his hands clenched at his sides, the fight draining from his frame with every heartbeat. He understood what had been lost today. He understood what could never be clawed back. As the Mevith Envoy departed, another delegation approached, this one Sindari, their thin forms moving with the quiet confidence of those who had survived long enough to recognize real change when it came. Vox leaned closer to Calder, his voice low. "Allies aren't given, they're made." Calder's reply was a whisper of iron. "Then we forge carefully." Across the chamber, the first speaker straightened, forcing composure onto a body that sagged with defeat. He rapped his staff once more against the stone, not the commanding strike of old authority, but the weary signal of transition. "The session is adjourned," the speaker intoned. "The council will reconvene within one cycle to review the proposals." The chamber emptied slowly, a tide ebbing backward, leaving only Calder, Ren and Vox standing amidst the scattered relics of an empire being dismantled one breath at a time. Ren whistled low under his breath. "Not bad for a day's work." Calder permitted a flicker of amusement. "It's only the first step." Vox secured the data caches, ensuring every word, every shift, every vote was recorded and transmitted back to Earth Command. The quiet click of encrypted locks falling into place was oddly comforting. They moved together through the corridors of Centurus Prime, their boots striking faded mosaics that once celebrated victories no one spoke of anymore. Outside, the stars burned cold and clear, indifferent to the battles of lesser beings. Calder paused at a wide viewing window, watching a transport carrying the Sindari delegation peel away from the station, its running lights blinking in quiet triumph. "They'll rebuild," Calder said quietly. "Not just themselves. The council too, stronger or smarter, or both." Ren stood beside him, silent for a moment, before answering. "If they don't, someone else will." Vox, joining them, added, "We just gave them a choice they never thought they'd have." Calder's gaze drifted toward Earth's fleet, still holding silent vigil. Defensive fields shimmered faintly in the sunlight, the ships more guardian than threat now. "They'll test us again," Calder said. "They always do," Wren replied, a shrug in his tone. "But this time," Calder said, his voice cutting clean through the uncertainty, "we'll be ready." Vox secured the final data streams, the last of the Council's fractured attempts to cling to the old ways catalogued and preserved. Their shuttle awaited, prepped for departure. Engines thrummed with quiet life, the scent of warmed polymers bleeding into the recycled air. As they stepped aboard, Calder allowed himself a final glance back at the station. Centurus Prime, once the untouchable seat of galactic power, now stood as a monument to survival and to stubborn hope. The shuttle pulled away smoothly, arcs of thruster light tracing soft scars across the darkness. Behind them, the Council gathered its pieces, some clinging to the old world, others reaching for the new. Ahead, Earth waited, not as a supplicant, but as a beacon. Freedom was never given, it was built, and Earth had just laid the cornerstone. "Cut main relay. Let them see us leave with our own light." Calder's command dropped into the comm channel as the shuttle peeled away from Centurus Prime's shadow. Earth's fleet followed suit, flowing into a coordinated withdrawal. Shields faded, cloaks reactivated, and for the first time in recorded memory, a human armada left the Council's doorstep without fear, without loss, without bowing. From the observation window, Calder watched the station shrink, a cracked monument adrift in the slow churn of the stars. Once, it had seemed untouchable, eternal. Now it looked smaller, breakable. Inside the cabin, the air vibrated with quiet tension, the kind that settles after a storm leaves the landscape raw and new. Wren leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, gazing at the station's dwindling form. His voice, when it came, was low, edged with something more dangerous than triumph. "They'll lick their wounds, plot, scheme, try to bend the world back to how it was." Calder didn't answer immediately. He studied the ripples Earth had cast, minor delegations realigning, trade routes already shifting, power brokers forced to reconsider who held the balance. "They'll try," Calder said finally, "and fail." Vox adjusted the feeds, heads-up displays cycling through new diplomatic requests, offers for joint defense pacts, whispered invitations to underground talks. He didn't look up. "They're afraid of what happens when people stop believing the old myths." Calder turned from the window, boots firm on the deck, each step a silent drumbeat toward the future Earth had claimed. He remembered standing at other windows once, watching humanity claw its way out of dirt and ashes, always underestimated, always unwelcome. That time was over. The shuttle glided toward the fleet's staging point, Earth's warships parting in silent salutes as their flagship rejoined them. Inside the command deck of the Resolute, the atmosphere was stripped of ceremony. Officers moved with the quiet efficiency of those who understood that real victory was measured in years, not minutes. Calder took the center chair without fanfare. Wren slid into the seat beside him, casual, almost lazy. Vox manned the tactical feeds, hands steady over the controls. Status reports rolled in. Colonies stabilizing, council votes deferred, opposition leaders withdrawing to reassess. The old guard's roar had become a whimper. Still, Calder's gaze stayed sharp, scanning every flicker of resistance, every muted threat wrapped in diplomatic language. "They'll call it peace," Wren said, breaking the silence. For now, Calder's voice was quiet steel. "Peace is never given. It's earned, held." Vox chimed in without looking away from the consoles. "Held, and when necessary, defended." The ship's engines rumbled, a low grounding vibration beneath their feet, a heartbeat of humanity's quiet strength surging outward into the stars. The bridge lights dimmed slightly, casting the crew in sharper relief. No banners flew, no anthems played, just men and women who understood that survival demanded more than victories. It demanded vision. From the command console, Earth's new diplomatic charter uploaded to the fleet's public archives, the Declaration of Sovereign Cooperation. Simple words, simple promises, equality, defense, growth, offered not by an empire, but by a people who had learned the price of freedom one scar at a time. Calder reviewed the document once more, ensuring every word struck the balance between invitation and warning. "We'll give them a choice," Calder said, "and if they refuse, we endure." Outside, a field of stars stretched unbroken, cold fires burning across the dark, like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Ren exhaled softly, a sound almost lost in the hum of readiness. "You think they'll ever understand us?" Calder's answer came without hesitation. "They don't have to." Vox turned, meeting Calder's gaze across the command deck. "They just have to know we're not leaving." Calder allowed himself a slow, grim smile. No, they weren't leaving. They were building. The first signal to Earth's colonies burst across the communication arrays, a simple pulse of light, the message encoded not in words but in certainty. "Stand firm." On the outer edge of human space, colony stations blinked acknowledgement. Outposts once hidden by necessity now declared themselves openly, ready to stand in the light. Earth had torn from the Council's grasp. The Sindari's first ambassadorial envoy prepared to depart from Centurus Prime, bound for Earth. Old enemies watched with hollow eyes as alliances shifted under their feet. The old order was not dead, but it was dying. The shuttle banks realigned, Earth's fleet surrounding them, like the ribs of a great beast waking from long sleep. Calder sat back, the weight of victory a cold, solid thing in his chest. Victory had cost them nothing visible. It had cost them everything unseen: patience honed to a weapon, anger smothered until it burned white-hot, pride swallowed again and again, until it forged something unbreakable. And that was why they had won. The stars ahead shimmered slightly through the ionized haze of the departure fields, glittering like shattered chains. Ren broke the silence first, his voice stripped of all the usual sarcasm. "Funny, we didn't come to tear it down." Calder's answer was a murmur of iron. "No, we came to build something better." Vox, finalizing the new fleet navigation paths, glanced over. "And if they can't accept that?" Calder's eyes never left the stars. "Then they'll get left behind." The last lock disengaged, the final tether snapping clean. Earth's fleet moved as one into unknown territory, into uncharted futures, into a galaxy that would never again see them as beggars clawing at the gates. They were something else now, not conquerors, not tyrants, builders, guardians, the architects of a future written in defiance and hope. Behind them, Centurus Prime spun slowly in its old orbit, a relic watching the new era unfold beyond its grasp. Ahead the stars waited, and this time, humanity was ready.